Tae-ho Kim stood in his office watching the stars through the massive window of Nexus Prime Station, and the view never got old. But today something felt different in the air around him, and he could not shake the feeling that trouble was coming his way like a storm across the void of space. The communication device on his desk beeped 3 times, which meant an urgent message was waiting for him. And when he pressed the button, a hologram appeared showing the symbol of the Interstellar Senate, which made his stomach drop, because they never contacted Earth directly unless something big was happening. The message began to play, and Chancellor Veltar appeared before him with his tall blue form and crystal-like skin that seemed to glow with inner light, and his voice carried the weight of authority that came from ruling over billions of beings across dozens of star systems. Behind him stood High Counselor Threshak, whose insect-like features and compound eyes made him look like he was always studying everything around him for weakness, and both aliens wore expressions that told Tae-ho this was not going to be a friendly conversation about trade agreements or cultural exchanges. Ambassador Kim of the Terran Republic. Chancellor Veltar began, and his voice echoed through the small office. The Interstellar Senate has reached a decision regarding your species and the threat you pose to galactic stability and peace. And those words hit Tae-ho like a physical blow, because Earth had always tried to be peaceful neighbors with everyone they met among the stars. The Chancellor continued speaking, and each word made the situation worse. Your kind has expanded across 47 star systems in the past 30 years, which is faster than any species in recorded galactic history, and this rapid growth combined with your military buildup has caused great concern among the 12-member races of the Senate. And Tae-ho wanted to interrupt and explain that humans only built defenses to protect their colonies, but he knew better than to anger these powerful beings. High Counselor Threshak stepped forward, and his multiple arms moved in patterns that Tae-ho recognized as signs of displeasure among his people. And when he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding metal. Your species shows signs of aggressive expansion, patterns similar to the Devourers who nearly destroyed the galaxy 3,000 years ago, and we cannot allow such a threat to grow unchecked. And the comparison to the Devourers made Tae-ho's blood run cold, because every child in the galaxy learned about those monsters who ate entire worlds and left nothing but empty space behind them. Therefore, Chancellor Veltar announced, the Interstellar Senate demands that humanity surrender all military vessels, weapons, and defensive installations to Senate control within 30 standard days, and your species will be placed under protective custody until such time as you prove you are not a threat to galactic peace. And the word custody sounded more like prison to Tae-ho, who had spent his entire career trying to build bridges between Earth and the alien civilizations they had encountered. The hologram flickered, and both aliens stared at him, waiting for his response, and Tae-ho took a deep breath before speaking, because he knew his next words would be reported back to every major power in the galaxy. I understand the Senate's concerns, and I will relay your message to my government immediately. But I must remind you that humanity has never started a war with any alien species, and we have always sought peaceful solutions to conflicts. And he hoped his voice sounded calmer than he felt inside. Chancellor Veltar made a sound that might have been laughter, but held no humor. Your words mean nothing when your actions speak of preparation for war and conquest. Ambassador, and the Senate has made its decision, and you have 30 days to comply, or face the consequences of your refusal. And with those words, the hologram disappeared, leaving Tae-ho alone in his office with the weight of his entire species' future on his shoulders. He immediately activated the quantum communicator that connected directly to Earth and waited for the encryption protocols to engage before sending his message to President Ji-woo Park, who would be sleeping at this hour, but would need to wake up for this news. The message began recording, and Tae-ho chose his words carefully, because he knew this communication would change everything. Madam President, the Interstellar Senate has issued an ultimatum demanding complete disarmament and surrender of human sovereignty within 30 days, and they view our expansion as a threat comparable to the Devourers, and are prepared to use force if we refuse their demands. And he included all the technical details and political implications before ending the message and sending it across the void to Earth. 3 hours later, his communicator buzzed with an encrypted response from Earth, and President Ji-woo Park appeared on his screen looking tired but alert, and her expression told him she understood the gravity of the situation. Ambassador Kim have briefed the military leadership, and we are calling an emergency session of the Global Defense Council, and I need you to buy us as much time as possible while we discuss our options." And she paused before continuing. "Do not agree to anything, and do not make any commitments, but keep talking to them and make them think we might comply." And Taeho nodded, understanding that she was asking him to walk a very dangerous line. On Earth, President Jiwoo Park sat in the emergency bunker beneath the Global Defense Complex, surrounded by the most powerful military leaders on the planet, and the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Fleet Admiral Dong-hyun Lee spread out holographic displays showing the locations of every human military asset, and the numbers looked pathetic compared to what the Senate could bring against them if they chose war over diplomacy, and General Hyun-soo Nam was already calculating how long Earth's defenses might hold against a full assault by 12 alien civilizations. Admiral Eunji Choi, who commanded the Outer System Defense Force, shook her head as she studied the tactical displays. "Our combined fleets might be able to hold 3 or 4 Senate member species, but all 12 working together would overwhelm us in a matter of days." And her words confirmed what everyone in the room already knew but had not wanted to say out loud. The human military was impressive by Earth standards, but they were still newcomers to galactic politics, and their technology was generations behind the ancient civilizations that ruled the stars. Just as the discussion was turning toward surrender and negotiation, the secure door opened and Dr. Subin Kang entered the room carrying a datapad that seemed to glow with its own inner light, and everyone turned to look at her because she rarely left her laboratory deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, where she worked on projects so classified that even most of the people in this room had never heard of them. She walked straight to President Park and whispered something in her ear that made the president's eyes widen with surprise and perhaps hope. "Ladies and gentlemen," President Park announced to the room, "Dr. Kang has requested a private briefing on a matter of the highest classification, and I am ordering this room cleared except for Admiral Lee and General Nam." And the other officers filed out looking confused and worried because they had never been excluded from a defense briefing before. Once the room was secure, Dr. Kang activated her datapad and a hologram appeared, showing something that made all 3 remaining officials gasp in amazement, because floating before them was the image of a warship unlike anything they had ever seen or imagined. 20 years ago, when we found that derelict alien ship near Pluto, I was put in charge of studying their technology. Dr. Kang began, and what we learned changed everything we thought we knew about physics engineering and what humans could accomplish when we put our minds to something important. And the hologram rotated slowly, showing details of weapons and systems that looked more advanced than anything the Senate possessed. She smiled for the first time anyone could remember. "The Senate thinks we are helpless primitives, but they are about to learn that humanity has been preparing for this day since we first looked up at the stars and wondered what was waiting for us out there." And with those words, everything changed. Dr. Subin Kang led President Jiwoo Park and the 2 admirals through corridors deep beneath the Pacific Defense Complex that most people did not even know existed, and the further down they went, the more security checkpoints they passed until, finally, they reached a massive vault door that required genetic scans, retinal verification, and voice authentication from all 4 of them before it would open with a soft hiss of pressurized air. Beyond the door lay the most classified facility on Earth, where holographic displays showed technical blueprints and test data that represented 20 years of secret research and development, and Dr. Kang gestured toward the largest display, which showed a cross-section view of the most advanced warship humanity had ever conceived. "When we found the alien derelict ship near Pluto in 2045, the technology inside was beyond anything we had ever imagined, but it was also damaged and incomplete," she explained, while manipulating the hologram to show different sections of their discovery. "However, our scientists and engineers did not just copy what we found, but improved upon it in ways the original builders never considered possible. The ship on the display was called UES Indomitable, and it stretched over 2.5 kilometers from bow to stern with a hull that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and weapon systems that looked more like works of art than instruments of destruction." And Admiral Dong-hyun Lee whistled softly as he studied the specifications, because the numbers were beyond anything he had ever seen in his 30 years of military service. "The fusion antimatter hybrid drive system can accelerate this ship to speeds that should be physically impossible," Dr. Kang continued, and the quantum tunneling projectiles can pass through conventional shields and armor like they do not exist at all. While the temporal shield matrix allows the ship to briefly exist outside normal spacetime, making enemy weapons pass harmlessly through empty space. President Park stared at the hologram, trying to comprehend what she was seeing. "How long have you been working on this project and how many people know about it?" she asked, and Dr. Kang smiled grimly before answering. "The Prometheus project began the day after we found the alien ship, and only 47 people in the entire world know the full scope of what we have accomplished, and most of them are currently aboard the ship itself, preparing for a day we hoped would never come." She touched the display and the image changed to show the interior of the vessel, where crew members moved through corridors that seemed to pulse with energy, and the technology looked so advanced it seemed almost magical. General Hyun-Soo Nam studied the tactical displays showing weapon specifications and defensive capabilities, and he shook his head in amazement. These quantum weapons could disable an entire fleet without destroying them, and the stealth systems would make the ship invisible to conventional sensors, but how do we know any of this actually works outside of computer simulations? And his question hung in the air because theoretical technology meant nothing if it could not perform when needed most. "The ship has been operational for 5 years, Dr. Kang replied, and Captain Min Ho Jang and his crew of 200 have been training in complete isolation at the construction facility in the Kuiper Belt, where they have tested every system and weapon to make sure everything works exactly as designed." And she brought up another display showing combat test footage of the indomitable, engaging target drones with weapons that moved faster than the human eye could follow and left the targets disabled but intact. Captain Min Ho Jang had been selected for command after a secret evaluation process that tested not just his tactical skills, but his psychological profile and moral character, because the power of the indomitable required someone who would use it wisely, and his crew included some of the most brilliant minds in human space, including tactical officer So Young-yoon, who had developed new combat doctrines specifically for the ship's unique capabilities. Chief Engineer Woo Jin Park had spent 3 years learning to maintain systems that operated on principles most scientists did not even understand, while weapons specialist Hee Jin Lee had become the first human to master weapons that could disable enemy ships without harming the crews inside. The construction of the ship had taken place in an asteroid field far from Earth, where automated mining systems had carved out a massive hidden shipyard, and the materials came from dozens of different sources, so no one supplier could guess what was being built, and the workers rotated every few months, so none of them saw enough to understand the full project. "The cost was enormous," Dr. Kang admitted, "but we funded it through the Deep Space Mining Corporation, which everyone assumed was just another commercial venture, but was actually a front for the most important military project in human history." Admiral Lee studied the crew roster and recognized some of the names as officers who had supposedly died in training accidents or been transferred to classified assignments, and he realized that humanity's best and brightest had been secretly assembled for this project. "These people have been living in isolation for years, preparing to defend our species," he said, and there was respect in his voice for the sacrifice they had made. The hologram changed again to show the asteroid field where the indomitable was hidden, and the facility looked like a natural formation from the outside, but inside was one of the most advanced shipyards in the galaxy, with manufacturing systems that could produce parts and weapons using techniques learned from the alien derelict and improved through human ingenuity and determination. "We built more than just a ship," Dr. Kang explained. "We created an entire industrial complex that could produce technology the Senate has never seen before, and our scientists have made breakthrough discoveries in physics and engineering that put us decades ahead of where we should be." President Park realized that everything she thought she knew about Earth's military capabilities had been wrong. "Why was I not informed about this project earlier?" she asked, and Dr. Kang looked uncomfortable before answering. "The project was designed to remain secret until it was absolutely necessary, because if our enemies knew what we possessed, they might have attacked before we were ready, and even telling you now is a risk, because there are spies and informants throughout the government who report to the Senate members." The tactical displays showed battle simulations where the indomitable faced entire alien fleets and emerged victorious without taking serious damage, and the scenarios included battles against Valdorian crystal ships, Zephyrian biomechanical, swarms, and even the massive geometric vessels used by the Construct's empire. Every Senate member species has been studied and analyzed, Dr. Kang continued, and we have developed specific tactics and weapons designed to counter their strengths and exploit their weaknesses because we knew this confrontation would eventually come. Agent Da-Un Shin, who had been coordinating intelligence operations across human space, entered the briefing room with a data pad containing the latest reports from their network of informants, and her expression was grim as she delivered her news. The Senate fleets are already moving toward their staging areas, and our sources indicate they plan to make an example of humanity to discourage other young species from challenging their authority. And her words confirmed that diplomacy alone would not be enough to save Earth. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications of what they were hearing, and President Park made the decision that would change the course of galactic history. Authorize Operation Revelation, she ordered. Bring the Indomitable to Nexus Prime and show the Senate that humanity will not be intimidated or conquered by threats and fear. And Dr. Kang nodded before activating a quantum communicator that would send coded orders across the solar system to Captain Zhang and his crew. Far away in the Kuiper Belt asteroid field, the Indomitable received its activation orders, and Captain Min Ho, Zhang stood on the bridge looking out at the stars that had been his home for 5 years, while his crew prepared their ship for the journey that would reveal humanity's greatest secret to the galaxy. And he knew that everything they had trained for was about to be tested in the most important battle in human history. Set course for Nexus Prime, he ordered, and the ship began moving through space invisible to conventional sensors as it headed toward a confrontation that would determine whether humanity would be free to explore the stars or spend eternity as prisoners of alien masters. The Indomitable's stealth systems made it impossible to detect as it accelerated toward the core systems, and its crew worked with quiet efficiency, born from years of training and preparation, and they knew that the future of their species depended on their performance in the coming days, and they were ready to show the galaxy what humans could accomplish when they were pushed too far and had nothing left to lose but their freedom and their honor. The massive space station Conclave Prime hung in the void like a metal moon surrounded by the most impressive display of military power the galaxy had ever assembled, and ships from 12 different alien civilizations formed precise formations that stretched for thousands of kilometers in every direction, while their crews prepared for what many believed would be the final judgment of the human species. Chancellor Veltar stood at the observation deck of his flagship, watching the arrival of each delegation, and noting with satisfaction that every member of the Senate had brought their most powerful warships to demonstrate their united resolve against the threat posed by humanity's rapid expansion across the stars. The Valdorian crystal ships gleamed like diamonds against the darkness of space, and their hulls seemed to pulse with inner light as energy flowed through living crystal matrices that could channel power in ways that defied conventional physics. And each vessel was a work of art as much as a weapon of war, with flowing curves and elegant spires that housed weapons capable of reducing planets to cosmic dust. High Admiral Corveth commanded the Valdorian fleet from his flagship Luminous Judgment, and he had personally overseen the destruction of 3 rebel worlds during the last galactic uprising, and his presence here sent a clear message that the Senate was prepared to use extreme measures. The Zephyrian biomechanical swarm ships moved through space like living creatures with hulls that rippled and flowed as they adjusted their configurations for different tactical situations, and each ship was part of a larger organism that could think and react faster than any individual crew could manage, and their weapon systems were grown rather than built, using biotechnology that blurred the line between machine and living tissue. Swarm Queen Zixara had brought 200 vessels under her command, and they moved in perfect coordination like a school of predatory fish, preparing to devour anything that threatened their territory. The geometric battle cubes of the constructs Empire hung motionless in space, and their perfectly straight edges and right angles looked alien and unnatural compared to the organic curves preferred by most species, but their mathematical precision hid weapons and defensive systems calculated to achieve maximum efficiency in any combat situation. Prime Calculation Unit 7742 commanded the Construct's fleet, and its artificial intelligence had analyzed every possible outcome of the coming confrontation and determined that humanity's destruction was the most logical solution to the current political crisis. War Marshal Grixoth of the Saurian Republic, paced the bridge of his flagship Tooth and Claw, and his reptilian features showed the barely controlled aggression that had made his people feared throughout the galaxy. And his ships bristled with kinetic weapons and plasma cannons that could turn enemy vessels into expanding clouds of superheated gas. And he looked forward to demonstrating Saurian military superiority against the upstart humans who dared to challenge established galactic order. Inside, Conclave Prime Ambassador Tae-Ho Kim walked through corridors filled with alien delegates and their various attendants and bodyguards, and he could feel the weight of hostile attention from every direction as representatives of 12 powerful civilizations prepared to sit in judgment of his species, and he maintained his diplomatic composure, despite knowing that most of these beings had already decided humanity's fate before the formal proceedings even began. Agent Da-Yoon Shin had managed to infiltrate the station's service staff, and her coded messages confirmed that the Senate had no intention of accepting any compromise or negotiated settlement, and they viewed this gathering as a formality before beginning military action against Earth and its colonies. The Grand Assembly Hall was a marvel of engineering that could accommodate delegates from species with wildly different environmental needs, and atmospheric processors maintained dozens of different gas mixtures, while gravity generators created zones of varying gravitational strength, and temperature controls allowed beings from frozen worlds to sit next to others who preferred desert heat, and the entire chamber was designed to demonstrate the Senate's technological superiority and ancient wisdom. Chancellor Veltar called the session to order, and his voice echoed through the hall as translation systems converted his words into the languages and communication methods used by every species present. We gather today to address the threat posed by the species known as humanity, whose aggressive expansion and military buildup threatens the stability and peace that has existed in this galaxy for over 3,000 years. And his words were carefully chosen to frame humanity as the aggressor in this conflict. High Counselor Threshak rose from his position and activated holographic displays showing the locations of human colonies and military installations throughout their territory. In less than one standard lifetime, these creatures have spread across 47 star systems and established military bases and defensive installations on over 200 worlds and moons, he announced, and the displays highlighted what appeared to be an aggressive expansion pattern designed for conquest rather than peaceful settlement. Ambassador Tae-Ho Kim requested permission to address the assembly, and when it was granted, he stood before the most powerful beings in the galaxy and spoke with quiet dignity. Honored delegates, humanity has never initiated hostilities against any alien species, and our military preparations are purely defensive measures designed to protect our colonies from the dangers that exist in unexplored space. But his words seemed to fall on deaf ears, as the alien delegates had clearly made up their minds. War Marshal Grixoth slammed his clawed fist on his delegation's table. Your words mean nothing human when your actions speak of preparation for war and conquest, he snarled, and the Saurian Republic has seen this pattern before when aggressive species begin expanding beyond their ability to control their own territory. And his accusation carried weight because the Saurians had been fighting wars for thousands of years and knew the signs of impending conflict. The Nexari delegate, whose silicon-based form sparkled with embedded crystal circuits, spoke in electronic tones that bypassed vocal cords entirely. Our analysis of human expansion patterns shows statistical correlations with 17 previous species that eventually became galactic threats, and the mathematical certainty of artificial intelligence lent credibility to their assessment, even though their data might be incomplete or biased. Swarm Queen Zixara rose from her biomechanical throne, and her multiple voice organs created harmonious tones that conveyed both beauty and menace. The Zephyrian Collective has observed human behavior and determined that their species lacks the emotional maturity necessary for responsible expansion into galactic civilization, she declared, and her words stung because they implied that humans were basically children, playing with weapons too dangerous for them to understand. Chancellor Veltar gestured toward the holographic displays showing human military assets. The evidence speaks for itself, and this assembly must act before this threat grows beyond our ability to contain it peacefully. And he emphasized the word peacefully, as if the Senate was offering humanity one last chance to surrender before more violent measures became necessary. Ambassador Tae-ho Kim stood once more and looked around the assembly hall at faces both alien and hostile. "If the Senate has already decided our fate, then why hold these proceedings at all?" he asked. And his question hung in the air because it exposed the hypocrisy of a trial where the verdict had been predetermined and the accused was not being given a real chance to defend themselves. Because High Counselor Threshak replied, "Even condemned criminals deserve to hear the charges against them before sentence is carried out, and we are not barbarians who act without proper legal procedures." And his words confirmed what Tae-ho had suspected, that this entire gathering was nothing more than theater, designed to provide a legal justification for what the Senate intended to do regardless. The debate continued for hours, with delegate after delegate rising to condemn humanity's actions and present evidence of their alleged crimes, while Ambassador Tae-ho Kim defended his species with growing desperation, and he could see that nothing, he said, would change the outcome because the Senate had decided that humanity represented an existential threat that could not be allowed to continue existing as an independent power. As the formal accusations were being presented, alarm signals began sounding throughout Conclave Prime, and the station's sensors were detecting an anomaly approaching their position, and the readings made no sense because they showed massive energy signatures but no corresponding visual contacts, and the defensive systems could not lock on to whatever was coming toward them through space. Prime Calculation Unit 7742 announced to the assembly, "Our sensors are detecting impossible readings consistent with advanced stealth technology beyond our current understanding." And those words sent a chill through the hall, because if humanity possessed such capabilities, then all their assumptions about human technological levels might be completely wrong. Chancellor Veltar demanded answers from his fleet commanders, but they could only report that something large was approaching Conclave Prime while remaining invisible to most of their detection systems, and the implications of such technology made him realize that humanity might not be as helpless as they had assumed, and the UES Indomitable materialized above Conclave Prime like a dark angel of judgment, and its massive hull blocked out entire sections of stars as it hung motionless in space, dwarfing every other vessel in the assembled fleets, and the alien crews stared in shock at a warship unlike anything in their databases or worst nightmares. The ship's hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and weapon systems lined its surface like the scales of some ancient dragon, while energy conduits pulsed with power that made nearby sensors overload from the electromagnetic radiation, being generated by systems operating on principles the Senate scientists could not even begin to understand. Captain Min-ho Jung stood on the bridge of his ship and looked down at the alien fleets through the main view screen, while his crew worked with quiet efficiency at stations that hummed with barely contained power, and he felt the weight of history on his shoulders, because what happened in the next few minutes would determine whether humanity earned its place among the stars or became extinct at the hands of beings who feared what they did not understand. "Open a channel to the Senate Assembly," he ordered, and his voice carried the calm authority of someone who had trained for this moment his entire adult life. Tactical Officer So Young-yoon manipulated her console with practiced ease, and the quantum communication system established contact with every ship and station in the system, while she monitored the tactical displays that showed alien vessels moving into attack formations around their position, and she noted with professional interest that their enemies were reacting exactly as the simulations had predicted they would when faced with superior technology. "Channel open, Captain," she reported, and waited for orders that would either begin a new era of galactic cooperation or start the most devastating war in recorded history. The image of Captain Jang appeared on screens throughout the alien fleets, and his calm human features contrasted sharply with the panic and confusion visible on the faces of alien crew members who had never seen anything like the vessel he commanded, and his words carried across space with crystal clarity. "This is Captain Min-ho Jang of the United Earthship Indomitable, and I bring greetings from the people of Earth to the assembled delegates of the Interstellar Senate." And his polite tone made the threat implicit in his ship's presence even more unsettling. In the Grand Assembly Hall, Ambassador Tae-ho Kim felt a surge of pride and relief as he watched the alien delegates struggle to comprehend what they were seeing, and Chancellor Veltar's blue face had turned an interesting shade of purple, while High Counselor Threshak's compound eyes were darting frantically as he tried to process tactical data that made no sense according to everything his species knew about human technology. Ambassador Kim. Captain Jang continued, "Please inform our hosts that humanity respectfully declines their generous offer of protective custody." War Marshal Grixoth was the first to recover from his shock, and his reptilian features twisted with rage as he activated his fleet's communication system. "Human vessel, you will surrender immediately, or face the combined might of 12 civilizations," he snarled, but his threats sounded hollow when directed at a ship that had appeared from nowhere and demonstrated technology that exceeded anything in the Senate's arsenals. Captain Jang's response was delivered in the same calm tone he might use to discuss weather conditions. "Marshal Grixoth, your concern for galactic peace is noted, but humanity has no intention of surrendering to threats and intimidation, and we suggest you reconsider your current course of action before someone gets hurt." And the quiet confidence in his voice made it clear that he was not bluffing about his ship's capabilities. The Valdorian crystal ships were the first to power their weapons, and High Admiral Korveth ordered his fleet to target the human vessel with everything they had, while Swarm Queen Zixara commanded her biomechanical ships to surround the Indomitable. In a formation designed to overwhelm any enemy through sheer numbers and firepower, Prime Calculation Unit 7742 ran probability calculations and determined that concentrated fire from all 12 fleets would destroy any single vessel, regardless of its defensive capabilities, and ordered the construct's battle cubes to prepare for simultaneous attack. "Tactical," Captain Jang said quietly. "Demonstrate our commitment to peaceful resolution." And so young Yoon's fingers danced across her control panel as she selected targets and powered up weapon systems that had been tested extensively, but never used in actual combat against living beings, and she felt the awesome responsibility of wielding power that could reshape the political structure of the entire galaxy. The Indomitable's quantum tunneling projectiles fired so quickly that human eyes could not track them, and they passed through conventional shields and armor like they were made of empty space before striking the flagship of each Senate member, species with precision that left the alien crew stunned and helpless. The Valdorian crystal ships found their living hulls suddenly inert and unable to channel energy, while the Zephyrian biomechanical vessels went into forced hibernation as their organic systems shut down to protect themselves from quantum interference. And the geometric perfection of Construct's battle cubes simply stopped functioning as their mathematical precision was disrupted by weapons that operated outside normal physical laws. Chief Engineer Woojin Park monitored the ship's power systems as they channeled energy through conduits that should not have been able to handle such massive loads, and he watched in fascination as the temporal shield matrix activated and shifted, the Indomitable briefly outside normal spacetime, while hundreds of alien weapons fired harmlessly through the space where the ship had been moments before. "Temporal displacement successful," he reported, all systems operating within acceptable parameters. And his words confirmed that humanity had mastered technology that bordered on science fiction. The alien fleets watched in horror as their most powerful weapons proved completely ineffective against the human warship, and their tactical officers reported readings that violated everything they thought they knew about physics and engineering, and some of the more superstitious crew members began whispering that they were facing beings with powers beyond mortal comprehension. Weapons specialist Hyejin Lee targeted the Saurian battle group with a single quantum projectile that passed through every ship in their formation and temporarily disabled their weapons and propulsion systems without causing any casualties, and her demonstration of restraint was more terrifying than any act of destruction could have been, because it showed that humanity possessed the power to annihilate their enemies, but chose mercy instead. The Indomitable then performed a series of maneuvers that defied conventional understanding of space combat as it shifted between dimensions and reappeared behind enemy formations, while maintaining perfect tactical positioning, and its movements were so fluid and graceful that some observers compared them to a dancer performing an elaborate routine, rather than a warship engaged in battle. Within minutes of the engagement beginning, 12 of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy found themselves completely helpless before a single human warship, and their crews stared at their disabled systems and tried to understand how everything they believed about their technological superiority had been proven wrong in such a devastating and humiliating fashion. Captain Jang opened another communication channel, and his image appeared once more on screens throughout the system. honored delegates of the Interstellar Senate, humanity has demonstrated our capabilities not to threaten or intimidate, but to establish that we will not be bullied or conquered by those who mistake our previous restraint for weakness. And his words carried the weight of absolute conviction. In the Grand Assembly Hall, complete silence had fallen, as alien delegates tried to process what they had witnessed, and Chancellor Veltar found himself face to face with a reality he had never imagined possible, that the species he had dismissed as primitive upstarts possessed technology that made his own civilization look like children playing with toys, and the implications of that revelation would reshape galactic politics forever. Ambassador Tae-ho Kim stood before the assembly with quiet dignity and spoke into the stunned silence. Perhaps now we can have a more productive discussion about humanity's place in galactic civilization. And his words marked the beginning of a new era in which humanity would no longer be seen as a threat to be contained, but as a power to be respected and perhaps even feared. The silence that followed the Indomitable's demonstration stretched across space like a physical thing, and 12 of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy found themselves confronting a truth that shattered everything they thought they knew about humanity and their place in the cosmic order. Chancellor Veltar stared at the tactical displays showing his disabled flagship and tried to comprehend how a species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers had developed technology that exceeded anything the Senate possessed, and his crystal-like features showed the shock of someone whose entire worldview had just collapsed. High Counselor Threshak was the first to break the silence, and his multiple voice organs created harmonious tones that conveyed both respect and wariness. It appears we have significantly miscalculated humanity's technological capabilities, he announced to the assembly, and his words carried the weight of someone who had built his career on accurate intelligence assessments, and now faced the reality that his information had been completely wrong about the most important military development in recent galactic history. War Marshal Grixoth struggled with emotions that his warrior culture had not prepared him to handle, and the idea that his mighty fleet had been neutralized by a single enemy vessel without suffering a single casualty challenged everything he believed about combat and military superiority, and he found grudging respect growing in his reptilian heart for beings who possessed such overwhelming power, yet showed restraint in its use. "How long have your people possessed such capabilities?" he demanded, and his voice carried none of its previous arrogance. Captain Min Ho-jang responded from the bridge of his ship with the same calm demeanor he had maintained throughout the confrontation. "We have been preparing for this possibility since we first encountered alien technology 20 years ago, because we knew that someday we might face beings who would judge us unworthy of freedom." And his words carried the weight of decades of secret preparation and sacrifice by countless humans who had worked in shadows to ensure their species' survival. Ambassador Tae-ho Kim seized the moment and addressed the stunned assembly with quiet authority. "The demonstration you have witnessed was not intended as a threat, but as proof that humanity deserves to be treated as an equal partner in galactic civilization rather than a problem to be solved through force." And he gestured toward the holographic displays showing the still functioning but disabled alien fleets. "We could have destroyed every ship here, but we chose to disable them instead, because we value life and seek cooperation rather than domination." Prime Calculation Unit 7742 processed the tactical data from the engagement, and its artificial intelligence reached conclusions that contradicted its previous assessments. Probability calculations indicate that resistance to human expansion would result in unacceptable casualties and resource expenditure, it announced in electronic tones that conveyed mathematical certainty. "Logical analysis suggests that cooperation rather than confrontation serves the best interests of all galactic civilizations." On Earth, President Jiwoo Park watched the proceedings through quantum communication links and felt a mixture of pride and relief as she realized that humanity had not only survived its first major test as a galactic power, but had emerged stronger and more respected than ever before, and she prepared to address the galaxy with proposals that would reshape interstellar politics for generations to come. Dr. Subin Kang stood in her laboratory monitoring the technical performance of every system aboard the Indomitable, and her screens showed that the ship had operated flawlessly during its first combat deployment, and she felt vindicated in her decision to spend 20 years developing technology that most people would have considered impossible. and she began planning the next phase of human technological development. Swarm Queen Zixara spoke for the first time since the engagement began, and her biomechanical voice carried tones of curiosity rather than hostility. The Zephyrian Collective acknowledges that humanity has demonstrated maturity through restraint and wisdom through preparation, she declared, and we withdraw our objection to human expansion into unclaimed territories, and her words marked the first crack in the Senate's united opposition to human independence. The Nexari delegate processed the implications of what they had witnessed and spoke in electronic harmonies that conveyed both respect and calculation. Our analysis indicates that human technology represents paradigm shifts in multiple scientific disciplines, it announced, and the Nexari Communion proposes joint research initiatives to benefit all galactic civilizations, and the offer of technological cooperation showed how quickly the political landscape was changing. Chancellor Veltar realized that his position as the leading voice against humanity had become untenable, and he faced a choice between adapting to new realities or becoming irrelevant to galactic politics, and his pride warred with his survival. Instincts before pragmatism won. The Valdorian hegemony recognizes that our previous assessment of human capabilities was flawed, he admitted, and we are prepared to reconsider our position regarding human membership in galactic institutions. President Jiwoo Park chose that moment to activate the quantum communicator, and her image appeared before the assembly as she addressed the representatives of 12 alien civilizations. Honored delegates, humanity proposes the establishment of an expanded interstellar senate with our species as the 13th member, she announced, and in the spirit of cooperation, we offer to share selected technologies in exchange for true equality and mutual respect among all galactic civilizations. The proposal sent shockwaves through the assembly because it transformed humanity from a threat to be contained into a potential partner offering unprecedented technological advancement, and the alien delegates found themselves reconsidering everything they thought they knew about galactic politics and the balance of power among the stars. Agent Da-Yun Shin had been monitoring communications throughout the alien fleets, and her reports confirmed that crew morale was collapsing, as beings who had considered themselves part of the galaxy's dominant military forces realized they had been outclassed by a species they had dismissed as primitive, and many were expressing admiration for humanity's restraint and victory. Admiral Dong-Hyun Lee began receiving applications from alien officers who wished to serve aboard human vessels and learn about the technologies that had made the Indomitable's victory possible, and he realized that humanity's military demonstration had not only prevented a war, but had actually attracted potential allies who recognized the value of associating with Earth's forces. Captain Min-Ho Jang addressed the Senate one final time. The UES Indomitable and its crew represent humanity's commitment to defending our freedom and protecting our allies, he declared, and we hope that today marks the beginning of a new era of cooperation and mutual respect among all the civilizations of this galaxy. And his words carried the authority of someone who commanded the most advanced warship in known space. The formal vote on human membership in the Interstellar Senate was unanimous after several hours of private negotiations, and when Chancellor Veltar announced the result, his voice carried resignation rather than enthusiasm, but also a grudging respect for beings who had earned their place through strength rather than begging for acceptance. 6 months later, Ambassador Tae-ho Kim walked through the corridors of the newly expanded Senate complex as an equal among equals, rather than a supplicant begging for mercy, and the walls displayed artwork and cultural artifacts from 13 different civilizations, including Earth. And he reflected on how quickly everything had changed since that day, when humanity had revealed its hidden strength to a galaxy that had underestimated human determination and ingenuity. The UES Indomitable had become the flagship of the new Galactic Defense Force, and Captain Min-Ho Jang found himself commanding not just human crew members, but volunteers from across the galaxy who wanted to serve aboard the most advanced warship ever built and learn from the species that had revolutionized space combat through superior technology and tactical innovation. Dr. Subin Kang led joint research teams that included the brightest minds from all member civilizations, and together they worked on projects that pushed the boundaries of scientific knowledge, while ensuring that humanity's technological advantages were shared responsibly with species that had proven themselves worthy of trust and cooperation. and she knew that the future held unlimited possibilities for beings willing to work together rather than fight over differences. The galaxy had learned that humanity would not be caged or controlled, and in earning their freedom through strength and wisdom rather than submission, humans had gained something far more valuable than mere survival, and they had won the respect of civilizations that had ruled the stars for millennia and established themselves as equals in the grand community of intelligent life among the endless sea of stars.